After back-to-back promotions from League One to the Premier League with Ipswich Town, Kieran McKenna is undoubtedly English football's most wanted manager this summer. And right now, it's looking to be, at the very least, a three-horse race for his signature. There's Chelsea, who announced Mauricio Pochettino's sacking just 2 days after the conclusion of the Premier League, despite the fact that he just guided them to their finest run of form since his arrival last summer, with just one loss in their past 15 Premier League fixtures. There's Manchester United, supposedly ready to kickstart a new era under Sir Jim Ratcliffe by replacing Erik ten Hag at the helm after 2 years. The Red Devils are reportedly interested not only in the incumbent Mauricio Pochettino, but also Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's former assistant McKenna, a man they believe to be capable of masterminding the significant rebuild required. And then you've got Brighton and Hove Albion, who just 1 day before their final Premier League match of the season announced that Roberto De Zerbi would be parting ways by mutual consent. A manager that had been touted as successes at both United and Chelsea, as well as Liverpool and Bayern Munich countless times throughout the season. Now, I am not an Ipswich Town fan, but in my opinion, Kieran McKenna should not leave Ipswich Town under any circumstances this summer, and I'm going to talk you through why. Winner of the League Manager Association's Manager of the Year, and only the third manager outside of the Premier League since 2000 to have won it. At the age of just 38, the Northern Irishman has 2 consecutive promotions under his belt in just his 3rd season in charge of Ipswich, and his 3rd season in first team management overall. He's the first manager to pull off back-to-back promotions from the 3rd to 1st tier since Nigel Adkins with Southampton in 2012, who was ironically soon replaced in the Premier League by, you guessed it, Mauricio Pochettino. Now, after their promotion from League One, there was speculation last summer of Ipswich being capable of pulling off the double. But most fans realistically expected Ipswich to consolidate their new place in the Championship, and that would have been by no means an underachievement had they done so. But it couldn't have been further from how it played out in reality, with McKenna's tractor boys storming their way to automatic promotion in the Championship with the most goals scored in the league, all courtesy of a team predominantly constructed in League One. Okay, fair enough, they spent a little bit of cash along the way, but their £4 million outlay pales by comparison to the parachute payment budgets of Leicester City, Southampton and Leeds United. For a fraction of the cost, they finished just a single point behind league winners Leicester, and forced Leeds and Southampton to hash it out in the playoffs as a result. That miraculous success all points back to Kieran McKenna. It is becoming increasingly clear that he is the real deal, and it is no surprise that some top sides have started to circle around him now. And also, unsurprisingly, that interest has caught McKenna's attention. He's reportedly likely to refuse a new contract with Ipswich amid the interest from these top sides, with both him and his assistant Martin Pert believing now is the time to move on to the next project. But as I say, in my opinion, McKenna should not take the Chelsea, United, Brighton and Hove Albion, or indeed any other job that comes up this summer. I think he should stick with Ipswich Town for their first season back in the Premier League in 22 years. That opinion comes down to 2 core reasons, which I'll break down a bit further. The first is that now he's entering his 4th season as a first team manager at Ipswich Town, the club still provides him with a perfect proving ground to continue to learn, develop and make mistakes as a manager. He is clearly a natural coach, but he hasn't managed in the Premier League yet, and Ipswich will stick by him regardless of whether they stay up or go down. That affords him time to make mistakes, try new things and learn his way around the Premier League as a manager. The second main reason, almost the opposite side to the same coin, is that the Chelsea, Man United and Brighton jobs are not the glittering opportunities they may at first appear. Let's cover the obvious pull factors with all 3 of these jobs. Cold hard cash in his pocket is the obvious one. All 3 will offer him a drastically improved salary, United and Chelsea more so than Brighton, but even the Seagulls will be able to offer him a salary that is far beyond what he's being paid at Ipswich. Then there's the fact that Ipswich are expected, regardless of McKenna's ability, to be in a relegation scrap next season. All 3 promoted sides that came up last summer have ended the season with relegation back down to the Championship, including Burnley, who absolutely blitzed the Championship just the year before. McKenna has made a group of League One players punch considerably above their weight, but the Premier League will probably be one step too far for many of those players. That squad will need a drastic overhaul this summer, and one that is probably outside of the reaches of Ipswich's spending power. McKenna may share in the view that the Premier League is just too big a jump for Ipswich, and that may be part of the reason why he feels now is the time to move. Taking any one of those 3 jobs on the table will mean that he won't be spending his first season in the top flight fighting relegation. And on the topic of transfer budget, that is another attraction of these 3 jobs. All 3 of these clubs will have transfer budgets that considerably dwarf that of Ipswich's, in theory giving McKenna more scope to shape and craft his playing squad. But this is where the dents in these 3 offers start to appear for me, all in slightly different ways. Chelsea, for as colossal as their expenditure has been since Todd Boehly's takeover, do not allow the manager to get involved in the incomings. Their American steward is playing fantasy football, but he wants you to work out what to do with the players that he picks. He sacked Thomas Tuchel fresh off of the back of Champions League glory when he expressed the desire to continue managing his side as he had been. Graham Potter fell to the same fate after just 31 matches when he started to ask to be involved in the recruitment. And now Pochettino has just had the sack, having just started to work out what to do with the clusterfuck of players that he'd been given last summer. Simply put, Chelsea has become a circus since their change in ownership. They say they want a young progressive coach, but what they really want is a yes man. And paradoxically, someone who will deliver instant success from those yeses regardless of how stupid the questions were. So not only will McKenna not have a say in the tools at his disposal, but he'll also have a very limited shelf life if things don't start well at Chelsea. Manchester United is the same but different. A summer rebuild is desperately needed, but according to the Daily Mail, their transfer kitty this summer is just £35 million, meaning any additional budget will need to be generated by what will presumably be a fire sale of their current squad, and I don't think most teams will touch those players with a barge pole. That puts a big question mark over just how much of a rebuild can take place at Old Trafford this summer. And like Chelsea, United is another circus, and it's one that has been raging on for years. It started to realise that it's a circus and it wants to change. But the trouble is, United's issues are so deep rooted and the quality of their squad is so lacking that it's going to take multiple transfer windows and multiple years for any real change to happen. Mikel Arteta's initial years at Arsenal are a very good example of that. My point here is that the transformation of Manchester United will take time, patience and commitment to a long-term strategy by the fans, the owners and the club as a whole. And those are luxuries that have been absent for pretty much every manager since Sir Alex Ferguson departed. Personally, I think that the overhaul required is so big that the manager that comes in and helps them turn the corner on a foundational level might not be the one who actually reaps the rewards on the pitch and wins them trophies, purely based on how long it's going to take. And although McKenna has taken a League One side that was flirting down the bottom of the table at the point of his arrival up to the top tier, the question is, does he possess the ability to gut a giant as big as Manchester United and rebuild it from the inside out, all while keeping everyone happy in the meantime? Does he know how to deal with the egos that come with playing for Manchester United? And can he command instant respect from such a fractured squad? He may fancy himself as the man that can fix Man United or Chelsea. The manager that makes that happen at either club, but particularly United, after years of falling from grace, will be revered. Look at the legacy that Jurgen Klopp has left at Liverpool. Money aside, that is the clear temptation of these kinds of jobs for a manager. But if it goes wrong at this early stage in his career, he might never get a top job again. Brighton and Hove Albion is, of the 3, the most logical option if he is to leave this summer. Unlike the other 2 candidates, Brighton is, on a business level, a model of how to run a modern Premier League football club. Their succession planning of players and managers, to little detriment of their on-the-pitch success, has been greatly admired over the past few years, and with De Zerbi now out the door, McKenna fits the bill of that system's ideal Brighton manager. They've supposedly been courting him for some time as a potential successor as a result. But still, the shackles would not be off on the transfer pot. Brighton analyse and identify the players, the manager works with them. It's a system that has allegedly been a point of friction between De Zerbi and the club, and one that has led to him leaving by mutual consent rather than him being snatched as earlier expected. The ability to influence those incomings is less of a problem at Brighton than it is at United and Chelsea, because their ability to spot good players is just far better than most other clubs, hence why Liverpool and Chelsea have been raiding them of their players. And that's why Brighton's model works when their players or managers leave. The bigger challenge for McKenna is that when the management is your sole role at the club, they expect you to produce on the pitch. They sacked Chris Hughton even after he led them to Premier League safety. De Zerbi has parted ways sooner than expected after an underwhelming second season, even with the extra demands of the Europa League in mind. They aren't afraid to pull the trigger when things aren't going according to their meticulous plan, and they will expect to see an improvement next year. The risks are less at Brighton than the other two jobs, but he could still be out of the door in 12 to 18 months if things don't go well. And really, that just takes me back to why staying at Ipswich just makes total sense for Kieran McKenna. Like Luton with Rob Edwards, Ipswich will stick by McKenna regardless of how the season goes. They know what a gem they have, they know how sought after he is, and they won't panic and sack him by Christmas. That gives him an entire season at the top tier of English football to experiment, make mistakes and learn more without fearing for his job. If Ipswich stay up, his admirers double. If they defy the laws of the universe once again and somehow finish in the top half of the table, everyone will want him. And if they do get relegated, unless it's with a points total lower than Derby County, his stock isn't going to decrease drastically, if at all, because people are expecting Ipswich to be in a relegation battle next season. It's unlikely that they'll go down because of McKenna, and far more likely that they'll go down because they're not sufficiently equipped to handle the Premier League. That's a win-win-win scenario. I mean, look at Vincent Kompany, relegated with Burnley and now somehow set to take over at Bayern Munich. Who the hell is this man's agent? Rob Edwards has similarly retained his admirers despite Luton going down. There's even talk that Ipswich could choose to install him if McKenna does jump ship. And it hasn't tended to end well recently when managers from smaller clubs jump ship for the bigger boys. Graham Potter's early dismissal by Chelsea may have seemed unfair to some, but it doesn't appear that more top tier clubs are coming knocking now that those vacancies are opening. You can argue the opposite way, that if you don't take the big jobs while they're available, then they might pass you by. Once upon a time, with Sheffield United flying high back in the Premier League, Chris Wilder was being linked with the Arsenal job. The only job he's managed to get in the top tier since being relegated with Sheffield United is, well, Sheffield United. But if McKenna is the real deal, he won't have to worry about those opportunities not coming back up. Look at Xavi Alonso pledging his allegiance to Leverkusen for another season, despite the Liverpool job coming up. Think about the kind of message that sends to his players, to the club, and to the wider world of football. In this case, showing loyalty to Ipswich Town, even for just one more season, will go a long way for his reputation. McKenna may feel that he would be doing Ipswich a favour by staying, but they took a big chance on him having given him his first manager's role, and they've given him this platform on which to shine. Next season, it's Kieran McKenna's turn to take a chance on Ipswich Town.